Today, I'm joined by someone who's been on the front lines of sales and marketing for over 2 decades. Not just talking about alignment between the two, but actually making it happen in boardrooms from Sydney to Silicon Valley. He's worked for giants like Canon, 3M, Dell, and Sony. But what really sets him apart is how he's taken all that experience and turned it into something powerful for SMBs trying to punch above their weight. He's the author of Smarketing, Sell Smarter Not Harder, and The One Team Method. A keynote speaker, a guest lecturer on executive MBA programs, and a man on a mission to modernize how we sell in a buyer-first world. If you've ever wondered why your sales team and marketing team feel like they're rival football clubs, or how to actually boost revenue without just shouting louder or hiring more reps, this is your episode. Peter Strohkorb, welcome to the You've Got Sales podcast.
Thank you, David. Awesome to be here. And what an intro. Thank you very much.
It's a real privilege to have you here, Peter. I really appreciate it. So I had to try and develop something that was worthy of you joining me today. So I really appreciate it. I've got some, I'm really fascinated by how you approach things in sales. So I've got some questions here for you that I just wanted to dig in a little bit deeper. And I think it's going to be really interesting for my audience of sales leaders to maybe start thinking about things maybe a little bit differently and giving them some things that might change their perspective a little bit. So I guess my first question that I had for you was, you've obviously worked with some of the biggest corporate names out there, Dell, 3M, Canon, Sony. I mean, what's the one universal sales truth you've seen hold up across all those environments? And what's the one piece of, I suppose, corporate gospel that you think is completely outdated?
Okay, well, they're probably one and the same. So the reason that I ended up founding my own business, Peter Strohkorb Sales Advisory, is that I really didn't enjoy the way that we were told we had to sell. You know, there was always the pressure on end of the month, end of the quarter, you know, sell, sell, sell. The irony was that at the beginning of the quarter, the sales leader would say, take your time, get to know the customer, you know, build rapport. And then 3 weeks later, they would go, where's the sale? You know, close. So slow down and hurry up and slow down, you know. So there's a bit of a dichotomy there. And the thing, to answer your question, the thing that got me is how inward looking we all were. Meaning we were focused on our pipeline, on our sales process, on our deal approval process, on our products and services, and how we wanted to sell, like our sales process. Right? It's all about us. And it almost felt like the customer was a bit of an afterthought. He or she was the pesky thing that stood in the way of a transaction, you know, or of commission, even worse. Right? And I've come to believe that the way we've been taught to sell, you know, banned, you know, medic, objection handling at the end of the sales cycle is all not how modern buyers want to be sold to. Because I've written an article just last year that I called "Opening is the New Closing," and what I meant by that is that if you open right and you establish rapport and your credibility, then the closing will take care of itself because it'll be a natural progression. Mm. And if you still have to handle objections at the end of the sales cycle, you frankly haven't opened right.
Well, it's on the, because obviously, you know, I've listened to a lot of your work around being in a buyer first world and how a buyer has changed over the last few years alone. We spoke before about how COVID sort of exacerbated that, and we can touch upon that as well. But It sounds like, you know, a buyer these days is, you know, far more distracted. They've got a lot more going on. They're more skeptical than probably ever, in your opinion. And what I thought would be quite interesting to know is if you took your modern B2B buyer and they had a Tinder profile, what would be on that bio, do you think, in 2025?
I have to say, Look, I'll confess I'm probably too old for Tinder. I've never been on it. So I've been happily married for the last 24 years and
It's
one
for the
month.
best. It's for the best, for sure. But I'm sure you've heard all the stories and know how it works.
But I can tell you what buyers no longer appreciate, and you're probably the same, right? Let me ask you as a question, and you as a buyer, do you enjoy being cold called?
I never pick them up ever.
So now you and millions of other people do no longer answer the phone to numbers they don't recognize.
Mhm.
So there goes cold calling.
Mhm.
Do you like being spammed with unsolicited email offers?
Don't even read past the first line.
Yeah, and you know, your email system does a pretty good job of weeding out the spam from other stuff. So most of your emails won't even reach a buyer. And when your system tells you, oh, this email was read, more than likely it was just previewed in a preview window and it wasn't even read.
Mm.
So there goes cold email.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do you enjoy when somebody reaches out to you on LinkedIn and asks you to connect with them, only for them then to hit you up with a sales pitch?
Doesn't it? Not at all, and almost doesn't matter how relevant or good it is.
Yeah. So there goes what's called pitch slapping.
Yeah.
With a P, I have to point out.
Yeah, just to emphasize, guys, that was a P.
So the traditional outbound methods are just not resonating anymore. And in fact, hypothesis, I guess, not even a theory, my hypothesis is that marketing automation ruined the game for everyone. Because we could all of a sudden spam 10,000 or 100,000 people, didn't really mean that we should have.
Mm.
But we sacrificed quality for quantity. We made, because if you're reaching a broad audience, you got to make your message really broad. And the broader the message, the less relevant it becomes. And so it's actually a pretty unintelligent game to do that mass outreach.
You see it in the data, don't you? It's just been crashing like crazy.
Yeah, look, the response rates, we used to be happy when we got 3 to 5% response rates, and now it's in the you know, not even in the 1%, right? And people are just hitting the spam button, you know, all the time, and including me. I'll do that all the time on the messages that even get through. You know what I mean? And so again, the traditional outbound methods are no longer working. And the buyers, we've actually trained the buyer to hide away and say, whatever you're selling, I'm not interested. So even if you reach them, you're not likely to engage them. And that's a very important point. So I make a huge distinction between just reaching out to people and to engage people into a business conversation, not even a sales conversation, but a business conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the question becomes, well, how do you do that? Yeah, what do you need to do differently? I say that if you put yourself into your buyer's shoes, what would they like? What would they happily pick up the phone to, happily answer an email to, and happily connect with you on LinkedIn on? And it's one of three things. Either you help them to identify a new opportunity, new revenue opportunity, new opportunity of any kind that they weren't aware of, that they didn't know. So you're doing them a favor, bringing this opportunity to them, but it's going to be a genuine opportunity that gives a benefit. You selling them something is not an opportunity. And the second thing is you warning them of a risk that they didn't know they were facing.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you're doing them a favor by avoiding them making a mistake or having some negative impact on their business. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, both those methods require that you do your homework. You understand their business, you understand the industry, you understand the things that the trends, and you understand what can go right and what can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a lot of effort, and even with AI, it's a lot of effort.
Mm. Are
So
you talking about? Sorry to butt in, Peter, but are you talking about what sort of vehicle are we talking here? We're talking like literally an art, for anything from an article to a video, something you've created. Could it be anything you feel?
no, so what I'm saying is you got to do your homework first before you can reach out,
Yeah, of course.
because you won't connect and you won't engage them unless you make it very specific about them and their business. So you got to
Right.
do your homework first, right?
Yeah.
Now, but both those methods are very labor intensive and effort intensive, and you've got to be pretty sure that you've got the right customer profile to even go to that extent. There is a third way, which is more scalable, and that is that you help your buyer to understand that they actually have a need for the thing that you're selling. You're not telling them, you're not ambushing them with something, and you're not making wild claims that nobody believes anymore anyway. you know, but if you can guide them and help them to understand that they have a need for the thing that you're selling, that's valuable to them, because again, you'd be doing them a favor. So all those three methods I didn't say you got to focus on your product or service. Yeah, you don't talk about the specs or the price. You talk about the benefits to the buyer, and then I have a method to tease it out of my clients. We talk about the benefits of the benefits. So and the example that I use is actually a true story. A CEO of a family business came to me, and he said, "We want to sell more of our highest margin product. How do we do that?" And I said, "Oh, okay. What's the highest margin product?" And he said, "Well, I run a cleaning business, and our highest margin product is a graffiti remover." And I said, "Okay, well, how do you sell it now?" And he said, "We sell it door to door. So we go to councils, we go to schools, we go to building sites, and we show them our product and sell it that way. But we'd like to sell more." And I said to him, "Have you ever considered the benefits of your cleaning product, your graffiti remover tool? And then have you considered the benefits of those benefits?" So, David, what do you think are the benefits to a school, say, if graffiti gets removed?
Obviously, it looks cleaner, looks more presentable. Doesn't look like it's going to be dangerous.
Yeah. Okay. So that's tick, tick, tick. Very good. What's the benefit of that?
More people will send their kids to that school.
Yeah. So parents will feel more comfortable sending their kids there. The more kids going to a school brings the school more notoriety in a good sense, right? The reputation goes up. A better reputation school will attract better teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Better teachers will in turn bring better parents, and so all these benefits of the benefits simply because you had a graffiti remover.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are we actually selling? We're not selling a graffiti remover. We're selling a cleaner image.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure any one of your listeners can apply the same method we just used to work out what they're really selling and what their buyers are actually buying off them.
Do you go? Is it a case of, because I think about this way when I'm doing roles in recruitment as well. I break down the benefits as a practical benefit and then an emotional or lifestyle benefit.
Totally. Yeah.
Is that basically the same process that you're going
Yeah.
through? Yeah.
So in the example of the school, you might think of the principal. All of a sudden their profile goes up, and their life becomes easier because they don't have to deal with angry parents and kids that say, "Oh, there's graffiti. I better add some to it."
Yeah. Right.
So there's absolutely an emotional element as well, and you know that people are people, and we buy with our head as well as with our heart.
Mm.
And sometimes we buy with our heart and then try to justify it with our head, after the fact.
Usually, you start with your heart and then you try and use logic, don't you, to back up your decision?
Well,
So
in recruitment, you probably find the same thing, right?
we
Somebody
do.
all of a sudden likes a candidate, and then they try to justify themselves why they like that candidate.
Usually the other way around, mainly because if someone might see a job, they really like it, and then they have got to go and ask, they've got to tell their missus about it or their partner, and then the logic starts coming into it. So you want to sell the practical and the emotional benefit. I guess you want to hijack the limbic brain and the logical part of the brain as well.
Well, the amygdala and the oxytocin both
Yeah,
have to kick.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So when you've got to that point where you understand the benefits of the benefits, and there's going to be multitudes of them, does your outreach then become focused on those benefits essentially?
Yeah. Yeah. What I like to do then is to follow up with a story.
Mm.
And this would be like a client success story. And the client success story would be a client that's similar to the type of person that we're speaking to. So if it's a CFO, it's another CFO story, right? If it's a principal, it's another principal.
Another school.
Principals story, right? So that they can relate to it. And David, the reason that stories are super powerful is that it's actually in our DNA to respond to stories better than to facts and figures. We can remember stories much better than any sort of facts and figures, right? It's just in our brain from where we were wearing loincloths, living in caves and sitting around the campfire, telling stories.
That's how
right?
information was passed through
That's
generations,
how
wasn't it? We
information was
didn't
passed
have the
before the
ability
written
to.
word. We use story, right? And so it's still in our DNA now to respond to stories. So I teach my clients to use storytelling as a means to engaging and connecting with the buyer. So what would happen is, for example, in the school example, we would say we would lead with saying that this tool is an image cleaner. And so what I like to do, what I teach my clients, is to say something that's a little bit intriguing, maybe even a bit weird, or maybe even a bit controversial. But what we want is for the other person to lean forward and say, David, tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? Or what the heck, right? Anything, as long as they ask a question, because then we go, okay, let me tell you what I mean by that. Right?
Do you literally open the hook? Is that like the opening hook is something like that?
Yeah. And I tell you what, psychologically speaking, they have actually given you permission to sell to them at that point, even if they don't realize it themselves, simply by asking a question, right? And not before. Before, you're just interrupting their day. So, let's just go back to the brain quickly. So you've got the amygdala, which governs your flight, and other thing response. And as soon as you're being ambushed with a sales pitch, your amygdala goes into defensive mode. You can probably feel that in yourself, right? But as soon as somebody goes, buy my stuff, you go, nah, not interested.
I had it last night. I had a guy.
You can actually feel your amygdala kick in and go, shit, I don't want this, right?
I had I got a guy come over to sell, have a conservatory built, and I invited this guy over. I already know he's in my house having a cup of tea with me, and I know he's going to sell me to it, and I'm so uncomfortable
There you
selling me
go.
the thing I've asked him to sell me on.
That's your amygdala doing that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you listen to a story, your oxytocin, your happy hormone kicks in, and you're actually becoming engaged, and you find yourself relaxing and taking in the story. So back to the story. So I teach my clients to tell a success story of a client that looks similar to the person they're speaking to in 3 steps. First step, this is what our customer was experiencing when we met them for the first time. And it's super important that you tell it from that person's perspective, the person that looks like the person you're talking to, right? And you say, this is what happened from a business perspective. This was the consequence on the person. This was the emotional reaction to that consequence of this person. And this is what they were worried about. This is what they were afraid of. And immediately they go, oh yeah, that's I feel like that sometimes, that's me, and you will see them lean forward and take in more because they go, you're talking about me. I didn't know that others are feeling the same way, right? Step 2, you just talk about what you did and how long it took. It's best if you just say, we deployed our graffiti removal tool, and within 2 weeks the graffiti was gone, right? Something like that. Just very, very plain. And step 3 is then what changed for our client. Ideally, what changed will be the opposite of what we described in step 1. So let's say they had to make a big buying decision. Yeah. 6-7 figure budget. They had to get this decision right. They were scared of getting the decision wrong, because if they get it wrong, they might lose their job. It might jeopardize their reputation. It might jeopardize their career, their upward trajectory, all that sort of thing. And so they were stressed, and they brought the stress home, and they kicked a cat at home. Right? You get the idea. Whereas in step 3, the decision was made. It was the right decision. He got a pat on the back from the boss. He might have got a little pay rise or a bonus, and he took his family on a holiday, and everybody's happy, right? So that's your 3-step storytelling formula. So if you intrigue somebody, get them to lean forward and say, what does that mean? Can you explain that? How does that work? Tell me more. And then you follow up with a story. They will immediately go, fantastic. Could that work in my business as well? Very rarely do people go, oh, that's bullshit. I don't believe you, right? They just buy into the story, and they say, okay, well, I'm interested now.
If it's specific, it feels real, doesn't it? As well, if it's specific, they feel
of course,
relatable to them.
Of course, you got to have a number of stories up your sleeve that you can pull out at the right occasion. But hopefully you've been in business long enough to have those success stories up your sleeve.
In essence, it feels so simple, Peter. I mean, that just makes complete sense. How often do you think companies actually employ that strategy?
No one does.
Yeah.
No. Because I tell you what, the success stories are all about, we got this product into this client. Yeah. Right? It's nobody ever says this is the benefit of what happened to the client. And I have to say, often, of course, the client's reluctant to put an official dollar figure on the benefit that they were getting, and they're also not happy to talk publicly about their personal affairs and the relief they felt afterwards, right? But I have another little tip for your audience, when it comes to testimonials. So let's say you have completed the job with a client, or you've sold them something, and you now want a testimonial of them. And of course you can say, David, would you be okay to say a few words about your experience with us? Right? And David might say, I don't know, I'll have to ask corporate comms and ask the lawyers, and maybe they won't let me, so let me come back to you, right? And what happens after they say, let me come back to you?
No,
they don't. So whenever you hear the objection that I've got to ask corporate comms, or I've got to ask my boss, or I've got to ask for permission, here's what you do. You say, in your personal opinion, in your personal experience, could you describe what we did for you? Because then they're not talking about the business or the company. They're talking about their personal experience with you. And nobody can take that away from them. Nobody can stop them from talking about that, right? Now, you've got to lay the groundwork, though, before asking for a testimonial. And the same thing goes for referrals, by the way. I teach my clients how to get referrals right, asking for referrals, how to get that right. And that is, if you put that on the table right at the beginning of the relationship. So you say, David, if we go ahead and everything goes well, would you be okay to give us a testimonial, so that when it all happens and it is okay, you can refer back to the yes that you got at the beginning, and it's not a new sale, right? You don't have to sell the referral, and often what happens is everything's done and dusted, everything went well, everybody goes, and then you're asking them to do more work. Right. Just when they've got everything out of you and there's nothing else that they can get from you, right? You're asking them for a favor, and they might just say, well, look, I've got everything I need, and why should I do more work for you?
I?
Why should I stick my neck out, right?
Mm.
So if you,
If it's more of a transactional sort of
so,
solution.
so I actually say, put it in your T's and C's, put it in your contract that you say at the end of the project, if you have a positive experience, you will give us a video testimonial, right? They can always scratch it out again, but if it's never in there, you have a hard time asking for it after the fact.
That's very interesting, because we do them after every single role we place. And because no one's going to object to the T's and C's, are they? They're not going to look at that and go, absolutely not.
Well, no, but even if they do, let them have a look, and if they object to it, you just take it out. You lose nothing, right?
Yeah.
But if it's in there, you say, well, as per our agreement,
Yeah.
When can we book this recording session with you?
Yeah, I love that. That's brilliant, because it's I mean, even from someone I send them every single time, probably hundreds of times, done it, and I still feel awkward to this day, because I feel like you're springing a bit of a trap on them. Yeah.
Well, you're asking them for a favor after they've got nothing else to get from you, right?
And usually after they've paid us as well, which is like,
there you go. There you go.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. Again, I don't hear at all about the testimonial piece of it being done, really. And if you want to get a compilation of those stories for the future, there's your pool of stories you can pull from, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
What about when you mentioned there for referrals too? Again, is it the same thing? Put it in the T's and C's, or
no. That referrals don't belong in the T's and C's. Although I guess you could, but the way, again, talking about the amygdala and the oxytocin, there is a right time to ask, there's a right way to ask, and there's the right person to ask for a referral, or for an introduction referral, same thing, right? So the right person to ask is, of course, somebody that knows people like your ideal customer profile, right? So that's no brainer there. The knowing the right time to ask is whenever you hear them say thank you. Again, oxytocin, they're saying thank you because something good happened for them, right? You helped them out of a bind, you got them to make the right decision, they're relieved, and they're going, thank you, David, that was really good. And whenever your listeners, whenever they hear the word thank you from a client, they should remember to ask for a referral or for an introduction to somebody else. Because why? Because referrals are simply the easiest and fastest way to get a new lead. And you come pre-qualified because somebody else is vouching for you, right? Somebody that they know. They don't know you, but they know the person who's introducing you. And so you come pre-qualified.
Yep.
So then you've got to know how to ask. So we know who to ask or whom to ask, and we know when to ask, but how to ask is important. And I teach my clients this method, and I teach them to make the request sound like the person you're talking to, like your client, would be doing their contact a favor by introducing you. It's not a favor to you, but for being introduced. But they would say, well, David's done such a great job for me. If he does such a great job for my other contact as well, the other contact will like me more, right? They'll thank me for introducing David because they'll be doing a great job for them as well, right? So I've got a method that teaches my clients how to do that so that it doesn't sound like a request. It sounds like you'd be doing your contact a favor.
Do you find, just speaking out loud for us, when we do referrals, I guess we've tried to hijack that process, and we actually offer a pretty big referral bonus. Do you find that if you just have the process that you've talked about there, that you don't really need to have a sort of incentive because
Look,
they're doing somebody a favor already?
look, I actually personally, when somebody offers me money for an introduction, it makes me feel dirty. It makes me feel mercenary. And I really only like to introduce people that I think are actually valuable to the person I'm introducing them to. I don't want to get paid for it. It just makes me feel icky, right? And I bet you I'm not the only one that feels that way. What you might be able to do is give them something more personable than dollars or pound sterling, right? Give them a voucher for a dinner voucher for two.
Okay.
Right? A bottle of champagne.
Yeah.
Something that's a little bit experiential. Right? This is, by the way, when car companies say you get a free tank full of petrol, it sounds more valuable than if you say, oh, we'll give you 50 pounds.
Yeah, it does.
Right? Because it's more tangible, and you know what a tank full of petrol means to you. Whereas 50 pounds, I could spend that on this, on that, and something else, or put it in the bank and never see it again. It doesn't have the same impact.
You're thinking about, I can go here with my partner with that money. I could go this far. I could do this thing.
Yeah. So you let's say you get a voucher for two to go out with your partner to dinner. At the dinner, I bet you're talking about who gave you the voucher, right?
Yeah,
and the whole experience becomes based on that relationship or that gesture that you got. Whereas money is super impersonal. It comes and goes and nobody cares.
That's super interesting. Again, it just makes logical sense, but it's kind of feels like that's been hidden. So that's really interesting information.
I had sorry, I'll just give you an example. I had a real estate agency once as a client. And they also gave money away for for a referral. And I said, why don't you give them a hamper, like a literally a basket with a bottle of champagne and some cheese and nibblies and stuff like that, as a thank you, and maybe a little card in there saying thanks for the referral. That's much more personable and much more memorable than transferring an amount of money into their bank account.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love that, Peter. Obviously, one of the things that you're known for is your marketing concept. We've touched upon quite a bit of it here. But would you be able to sort of summarize what that means?
Okay. Well, you mentioned all those multinational organizations that I used to be involved with. And every single one of those, sales and marketing were operating in separate silos. In one particular instance, I actually described the relationship as having barbed wire fences between the silos. And the result was that the sales and marketing people were talking more about each other behind their back than to each other, and not in a good way. And so there was this real animosity, and the salespeople used to say, well, marketing spends, sales brings in the money and marketing spends it. A marketing lady that I once knew, had this, she thought it was funny, story. It's this funny saying. And she said, David, what's the difference between a salesperson and a marketing person? And you'd say, well, I don't know. Well, tell me. And she'd go, and education. Yeah, because she went to university as a marketing person, studied marketing and got a degree. She felt she was superior to a salesperson that doesn't have a degree, even though a lot of salespeople now have degrees, not in sales, but in something else, right? But the attitude was, if you don't have a degree, you can't be you can't be clever, and you can't be as good as me.
Yeah, it's like a snobby issue. Yeah,
Yeah, literally looking down on the
looking
salespeople.
down on them. Yeah, yeah.
And so to answer your question about marketing, it's obviously a conglomeration of sales and marketing together. And I actually believe, and that's why my first book's called The One Team Method, because it's a method to bring sales and marketing together as one team. And I talk about a virtuous cycle of collaboration. And that is, if marketing would confer with sales before launching a campaign, like allow sales to input into the campaign and give their opinions and their, even good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't matter, but ask their opinion at least. Why? Because firstly, the campaign will probably be better. And secondly, your salespeople will be bought in more into the campaign because they've helped create it, right? So they're part of the solution. And and then once the campaign goes out and you've got, I don't know, a white paper or you've got some sort of ad going, get feedback from sales about what the customers are saying about this white paper or this ad, right? And they might say, look, I showed this white paper to a CIO, a Chief Information Officer, and this is what they said about it. They said they really liked this bit, but they were kind of arguing with me about this bit. So then marketing go, that's interesting. We might just clarify something here, or and just improve the collateral. So virtuous cycle of collaboration, and I tell you what, it makes marketers better. It lifts sales, the sales performance, and it gives the customer a better experience because it's more relevant and suited to their needs.
Have you got one? Is there one particular transformational story that you could give an example of when it comes to that comes to mind?
Yes, of course. There's a multinational organization that's that was transitioning from on-prem software to SaaS, and the salespeople. Just have a glass of water. But I must be talking too much.
It's also very hot over there.
The salespeople were reluctant to sell software as a service because it meant that at any time the customer could cancel the contract. Whereas if they sold on-prem software, then they would come back 3, 4, 5 years after the contract was signed and try to renew the contract, right? So plus they got paid for the length of the contract and not just for 1 year at a time. So it was far more rewarding for the salespeople to sell on-prem than SaaS. But as we know, SaaS and subscriptions are the way that everybody's going now because it creates stickiness and the salespeople don't get paid for 5 years in advance. So the onus was on marketing to create the collateral that would persuade customers to buy SaaS, software as a service, rather than on-premise software, right? And the salespeople were just simply given the collateral and were expected to perform accordingly. And of course, we had active and passive resistance, and it just didn't work. So what we did was we actually sat down together with the sales and the marketing teams, and we said, what's in it for the customer if they go to SaaS, right? What's the benefit to them? Let's sell them those benefits instead of stubbornly adhering to the what we used to sell, the old. Plus, I have to say the commission rates were adjusted, of course, so that it became less attractive to sell on-prem and more attractive to sell SaaS. So that worked. There's an old saying, I don't quite believe it, but there's an old saying that salespeople are coin-operated vending machines, and if you put a certain coin in, they behave a certain way. But I don't think that's universally true, because people are people, and different people get motivated by different things. but in any ways, by helping the team to understand what it looks like from the customer's perspective, and it actually makes a lot more sense, and it makes it easier for me to buy because it's not a 5-year capex purchase. It's a recurring OPEX, operational expense, right? The customer can actually tax deduct it in the year that it accrues, and they don't have to write it off over 3, 4, 5 years. So there's actually benefits for the customer beyond the fact that it makes it more flexible to them, and also brings them tax benefits and cash flow benefits as well, because they don't have to pay commit to that up for 3, 4, 5 years up front. So just by helping the salespeople to understand what it looks like from the customer's perspective, help them to come across to selling SaaS. Yes, the commission structure helped as well.
Sure. And have you found, generally speaking, over the years, the two silos with the barbed wire around them, do you find that is stayed consistent, getting worse, improving as time goes on? What's your sort of impression?
So everybody likes to pretend it's getting better. It's not my experience. In smaller businesses, yeah, definitely. Multinationals, definitely not. We've tried to use CRM. We've tried to use things like Slack. We've tried to use AI now, to bridge those gaps. But really, if your mindset is that sales is inferior to marketing, no amount of technology will help you. And in my book, I describe it that the process needs to be, or the sequence of addressing the issue needs to be people, process, technology. And most organizations do it the other way around.
Do you find that gets exacerbated from industry to industry as well, or is it just you?
Look, my background is IT and technology. Also B2B services. So if any organization that sells a service to another business is my sweet spot. So I'm talking predominantly about those sectors.
Sure. I'd imagine I was thinking of what immediately came to mind then would be something like the fashion industry. I reckon that is one where that's probably exacerbated even further with the marketing team and the sales team. I'm not sure why, I could be completely wrong there, but I just feel like that would be quite a huge gulf between.
Yeah, I should mention that I try to stay away from B2C.
Yeah.
Because I frankly I don't feel quite qualified for it. I've spent my life in B2B and I'm really comfortable there.
Sure. What obviously for my audience and what I do, I'm having a lot of conversations around hiring, a lot of founders, owners, sales leaders. We spoke just before this call. I've had a couple of instances recently of people hiring their first salespeople ever in the business. So when you have a sales leader or a founder come to you and say, "Oh, Peter, I'm going to be making my first sales hire," what's the one piece of advice that you would give them immediately, and what's the one thing that you tell them to stop doing immediately?
So in most cases, I tell them to stop hiring, and here's why. There's nothing wrong with you hiring your first salesperson, right? And you probably think there's a good reason for it. So typically the path is like this. A founder starts a business. They're by themselves. They're like a solopreneur, which means they got to do everything. They got to do the accounting. They got to do the stock management. They got to do the marketing. They got to do the sales, the promotion. They're just doing everything, right? Most founders are not naturally good at selling, right? Because they're good at maybe technology because they developed an app, or they're good at, fashion, and they understand fashion, but they don't understand selling, right? So they go, "Oh, I actually don't know much about selling. I don't actually like selling. What can I do? Oh, I know. I've got a good network of contacts. I hit them up." So they go out to the network and they've got some moderate success selling to the network because the people know them and they kind of go, oh yeah, okay, bloody hell, I'll buy this thing from you, right? Maybe they like to prop them up a little bit in the beginning, you know. So they've got some success growing the business and growing revenue through selling to people that they know, to the network. Before too long, though, sales will stagnate or maybe even go back down again because they've run out of network to sell to. And that's when most of the people go, most of the founders go, oh, I need to hire a BDM. I need to hire a salesperson. But the question I asked, and then coming back to your question, is do you know your ideal customer profile? Do you know who's the ideal person, type of person to sell to? Do you have a unique value proposition that sets you apart from everybody else and helps your ideal customer profile to understand what's in it for them if they buy this thing from you, right? Do you have a brand promise? Most businesses don't have a brand promise, and a brand promise is nothing to do with the color of your logo or your style guide or anything like that. It's simply a succinct description of what it's like being your customer. What's the customer experience that you can expect from me? Nobody talks about that. Everybody says how great we are, yeah, but nobody says this is what our customers get from us. This is what they experience typically, right? Mm-hmm. Then do you know how to fend off your competitors? Because you'll have competitors, right? Do you know how to, if somebody objects and says, look, Steve over here is selling the same thing, why shouldn't I buy from them? You have an answer, right? Then do you know if you're in B2B, you'll be asked to submit a proposal? So do you know not only what goes into the proposal so that you put your best foot forward winning the deal, but also how you treat the proposal process so that you eliminate your competitors? And again, I've got a special method that I teach my clients so that their proposal ends up being the one left standing that wins the deal. Then we talked about customer experience. So what do you need to do to give your customers that experience that stands you out from the crowd? And we've already talked about referrals. How can I get more referrals from my existing clients so that they refer me to new people who come into the top of my funnel? Yeah. So there's 10 buyer-focused selling competencies that I teach my clients.
And it's getting those set up first before you start spending big and throwing.
So thank you. You've just reminded me what the original question actually was. So I say, do you know your ICP, your ideal customer profile, right? What's your value proposition? You know, what makes you different from Joe Blog around the corner? You know, and usually the response of the founder will be, won't the BDM bring all that with them?
Yeah, a bit of white knight syndrome.
They kind of go, well, I hire this person and they'll create a miracle for me.
Yeah,
it's like fingers firmly crossed, right?
Yeah.
And no, the BDM will not bring that. The BDM will do what you did, namely they'll try to sell to their network. And depending on how it goes, they might hang around or they may not. If they don't go well, they will leave within 3 months and you have to start from scratch. Even worse, potentially, if they do well and you then hire a second BDM, they will bring their network and they have their way of selling and they have their value proposition and they do things their way. And then you hire a third, fourth, fifth, and you have a huge spaghetti warren that you then need to untangle again because everybody does it differently.
No one's singing from the same hymn sheet, are they?
And there's no consistency in messaging. Depending on which sales rep you get, your experience is different. Yeah. And it's very confusing. And it's a bucket load of work to untangle that mess.
Yeah, right.
So I say, get your house in order first, then hire your BDM. Because the first BDM will ramp up more quickly because all these things will already be there for him to pick up and run with. The second BDM will ramp up. the third BDM will ramp up and it'll be consistent. So do not rush out and knee jerk to hiring a BDM because you've run out of network. Be smart about it.
And I, for anyone listening, I don't want to do myself out of my business here, but I can attest to what Peter is saying, because I've seen it happen with people who I've placed in companies, really good salespeople, but they're just, they don't have all those elements that you've spoken about there. They're the white knight, the unicorn coming into the business. They'll bring that information with them, and lo and behold, 12 months later, it doesn't work out. And then they get into a cycle of hiring one after another, and five salespeople in 5 years, same problem each time.
Actually, it's not a good look for the organization either.
No.
Right? If your rep changes all the time.
Yeah, totally. So off the back of that particularly, I mean, when I think about the salespeople out there, what is something that they get blamed for that you think is actually a leadership issue?
Well, let me give you an example. A Sydney-based provider of IT hardware. The business has been around for 25 years, same owner for the same 25 years. And the owner and I were referred to each other, and we went to a casual lunch and had a bit of a talk about the business. And his opening claim was pretty much, my salespeople are all lazy. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Can you elaborate on that, right? And he said pretty much that a request for a quote comes in, and they take the quote and they take the request and they create a quote, and out goes the quote. Job done. So they were actually more taking orders than actually selling. He then hired some people that would actually go out and sell as well, but they didn't they weren't really that successful. And so again, his opinion was that they're all lazy. And so what I did was I went into this business when they had a kickoff day, when all the salespeople were in the same room together. The marketing team, just going to turn the light on. The salespeople, the management team, they're all together in the same room. So finally, we could address them all as one organization. And I gave them a 2-hour workshop on buyer-focused selling. And what we agreed on afterwards was that when a request for quote comes in, the salesperson would ring the client up and say, I've just got your request for a quote. Can I just ask you, what are you using this stuff for? Because I'd like to make sure that it's the right thing for the application. Right? Helpful. Right? I want to make sure you're buying the right thing. And every single salesperson, I asked for a public commitment. So I said, if you're happy to do that, if you're willing to do that, bring up every time a quote comes in, you ring up and you say, look, can I ask you what you're using it for? What's the application? Because they were selling IT stuff to hospitals and critical infrastructure like that, right? So every single hand went up. Yeah, happy to do that. Not a problem. So I went thinking, job well done. Thank you very much. What I was told afterwards, later down the track, happened was that at the next time all the salespeople got together, the business owner said, so we had Peter in here for a workshop. So who's happy to cold call? And not a hand went up. So the owner felt that they all were lying when they said they don't mind ringing the person that requested the quote to make sure that they're buying the right thing, when he conflated helping the customer with cold calling. And so he was blaming his salespeople for being lazy when he was actually the obstacle in the business.
That's very interesting. I imagine that's very common, actually, thinking about.
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I tried to catch up with the business owner again several times and try to let him realize that that's what he's doing. But he was so convinced that he wasn't the problem that he just didn't want to listen.
And that simple frame would have changed that for that sales team, right? How you're framing that, and the obstacle in front of them would have felt like a lot less. And you just open that one question, opens the door then to all sorts from there, isn't it?
Well, it's the amygdala and the oxytocin, right?
Yeah, totally.
Help. So I had a bunch of students. You mentioned that I do guest lecturing, right? So I had a bunch of executive MBA students, and my opening question was, they were all engineers, and they were trained to become pre-sales engineers. So my opening question to them was, when I say salesperson or salesman, and I had a pen ready on the whiteboard, and I said, what comes to mind? They said, dirty, filthy, sleazy, lying, cheating bastards, and then I said, okay, got it. What comes to mind when I say helping? And they said, oh, helping's good. We love to help our clients make sure that we're engineers and we know, whether they're buying the right thing or not. So we like to help them. And I said, so it's a mindset shift, right? If you just don't think about buy my stuff, but if you say, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, let me make sure you're doing the right thing by yourself, so you won't get into trouble later, or you get the pat on the back from the boss, or whatever, the motivation might be. That feels natural to everybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like selling when you help.
Just off the back, one sort of final question, Peter. Off the back of that, obviously you've done a lot of teaching, a lot of people, different stages of their careers, lots of different elements you can help them with. Over the years, what do you think is one thing that you used to teach that you no longer teach because your mind got changed? And what was it that changed your mind?
So I was caught in the treadmill of having to sell features and price. So I tell you now, the one of those multinational organizations that I used to work for was a photocopier company, and we were told by marketing to sell the features of the multifunction device, the copier, right? Oh, A3, A4 color, double-sided, woohoo, and no surprise, no client was ever fascinated by that, right? And so then we used to start selling on features and price. So you get these features, but this is our price, and of course that's a race to the bottom. So a price war, the saying is that a price war is very easy to start and almost impossible to end. Mm-hmm. And everybody loses, by the way, except the customer. Maybe they win. But then as margins go down, your service goes down and your customer experience goes down as well. So actually nobody wins. So what we changed was that we would no longer sell the photocopier as a CapEx item. We would no longer sell the box. What we would do is sell it as a service. So the copier would actually belong to us. We would make it available to the customer as a service. They would pay a monthly service fee, which would include a certain number of copies or prints or whatever, double-sided, single-sided, color, black and white. And again, they could write the expense off in the year that it was accrued. It was an operational expense, not a CapEx. And their cash flow became more predictable because every month they get the same bill. Yeah. And so we actually had to stop selling the way that we were told to sell and start selling in a way that's more palatable to the customer. This particular head office of this particular company, so obviously I was working for the Australian subsidiary, but the overseas head office kept saying, what are you doing? Sell the box, sell the box. That's what we're used to, right? And in the end, because Australia's a long way away from everybody, and we're sort of this Anglo-Saxon microcosm that is similar to America and similar to the UK, similar to English-speaking sort of background countries. They let us be a little experiment for the organization, and now and now managed print services is the only way that people buy these things. You know, it made so much sense that everybody's picked it up now.
Fascinating. Awesome stuff, Peter. Thank you so much for all that information. I love your perspective on things. It really is. It's very interesting, especially the meld between sales and marketing. For me, as a small business owner, they're one thing, and I always treat them as one thing.
And sorry, David, to interrupt you. You know why that is? Because your marketing person can sit in the same room with you, and you just have a natural conversation because you're together, right? As soon as you separate them out onto a different floor, different building, different suburb, different city, different country, the gap widens.
Yeah, I remember this when I used to be a recruiter for a big multinational. It felt like they were a different company, almost. They were like a mythical. I never met anybody from marketing once.
There you go.
So, I was there for 3 years, but never met anybody from marketing once. And I don't think for a job that was 95% marketing jobs to people, you'd think you'd maybe hear a bit more about that, but we absolutely didn't. So I've absolutely felt like it was a silo. And I think when I speak to companies all the time, I always ask them about what their marketing situation looks like, because obviously you want to see what the marketing support is like for the person I'm going to be placing in there. And I often get quite a vacant look about
why'd you ask that?
Yeah, absolutely. And
what's that got to do with anything?
Yeah, exactly. We don't need people in our marketing team, Dave. Don't start going down that route as well. It's like, no. It's useful because I see it as it helps my job as a salesperson up to no end if you get it right.
Yeah,
it's so
absolutely.
much easier. But
totally.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I really appreciate your perspective and you spending your time with me today. For people who want to reach out to you and find you and potentially work with you, where's the best place to find you?
Well, peterstrohkorb.com. So myname.com. It's the website. That's where you can find all the stuff, including, by the way, 2 self-assessments. And they're both free, and they both only take about 5 minutes, but they give you quite clear insight into what you can still do in your organization. and they're both on the website. One for sales and marketing alignment, so that's under the marketing tab, and the other one is self-assessing your organization in terms of how ready are you for buyer-focused selling. So how ready are you to focus on your buyer instead of on your products and your services and your sales process and your pipeline, right? And again, very quick, free of charge. And afterwards, you get the option of discussing your results with me, and I'll give you some tips. And if you don't want to speak to me in person because you're worried that I might sell you something, you can actually go to a tab on the website called Ask Peter. And Ask Peter is my AI alter ego. You can ask Peter your sales-related questions, and he'll answer you as though I'm answering you. And it's free, and it's actually quite a bit of fun to get that experience as well. And again, once you've knocked yourself out on Ask Peter and you feel more confident talking to me in person, you're welcome to reach out to me either through LinkedIn or on the website.
That's awesome. I'll put all of those links in the description of whatever platform people are listening to, as well as on our LinkedIn posts as well. So yeah, thank you, Peter. I really appreciate you and your time. So it's been awesome. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you, David. And thanks again for the awesome introduction. That was great.
You're welcome. We'll do it again sometime. I'll try and amp it up even further in the future.
I look forward to it. Thanks again, David.
Thank you, Peter.